Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Emma McClarkin, CEO of the British Beer and Pub Association and lover of all things pub. Coming up on today's show, Emma tells us how she makes decisions.
Secret negotiations that took place behind closed doors.
Phil finally figures out his direction. That's what I want to do. And we learn that Emma is a stand-up comedian to royalty.
I was very lucky in that it was from the King that I was able to make him laugh.
All that and so much more as we chat through Emma's quite brilliant story so far. I love this chat with Emma, and she has worked in some interesting places including sport and politics before finding her place in the sector. Definitely not your run-of-the-mill story. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like and a share wherever you can. Enjoy! And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Emma McClarkin.
It's good to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I've had a good start to 2025. I know it's a tough one for the sector, but I'm hopeful that this year we will still be able to achieve a lot, succeed a lot. It is extremely tough, but I have a great team at the British Beer and Pub Association, and I'm really looking forward to this year.
Brilliant. Well, you just went straight into that there, which is great. So tell the world what it is that you do.
So I'm the Chief Exec of the British Beer and Pub Association, a role I'm incredibly proud of. And I've led the BBPA now for some 5 years, and time flies when you're having fun. And despite all the challenges that this sector faces, I'm still having a good time. And that's the ethos of the sector, really, is that's what we're there to do. We're there to make people feel good, give them a warm welcome, pick them up when they're feeling down. And that's the kind of positive outlook I want to have for this year and
Totally.
for the sector.
Yeah, well, you are bang on message for the podcast, because look, I have spoken about this on this show before. I brand myself as naively positive, but the thing about that is, for me, is that we kind of have to be a little bit, because there is a lot of challenge out there, and I'm not naive enough to accept that, you know, we can just get past it all by a little bit of hope and yay and all that. But we've got to at least try, and that's the kind of the line in the sand that we need to draw, that we believe that we actually can get past this.
I totally understand where people are at, and there's a cliff edge that's coming in April, and all of the announcements on the budget are going to hit. You know, we're desperately hoping that the Chancellor sees the light and recognises we can't take so much burden and cost to doing business of some 650 million all at once. But the reality is that when we open our doors and people step into our venues, they're expecting a quality experience, and their expectations are greater now, more than they've ever been. And so we really do need to remind ourselves, you know, we have to provide that quality service, that warm welcome, and that feel-good factor. That's what we do. That's as an industry, and it's what we also claim that we can do for the politicians to make the voters feel that they're also being listened to and getting that feel-good factor when they make their announcements. So we have to keep it up. I know it's tough, but keep the faith. We have an amazing business. We have amazing people that work for us. So we have to keep looking forwards.
Yeah. I think in times of toughness, I think you have to find the glimmers of hope. You have to find the moments that give you this feeling that, you know, this will pass. And that is generally what happens in history, is that there are moments of toughness and we all get past them. I mean, just look at COVID, right? I mean, that was probably the big moment of toughness that we all share. And somehow we're still here, you know, despite being shut down for as long as we were. So yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to make this gloomy. I definitely don't want to make it, I suppose, as I said, naively positive. I'm fully respectful of the fact that people are facing big challenges, but at the same time, you can only generally get past the challenge with a mindset that says you can do it. So yeah, that's my battle cry.
Yeah, and I feel that, you know, I'm always fully armoured at all times. It's just the way that we have to be. We have to be really resilient. We have to be ready to roll with the punches. And definitely, as the lobbyist of the sector, it's been challenge after challenge since the pandemic. So we just keep the armour on, and that's why we're here to support our members. And we're ever ready to go into battle. But we still need to have our moments of celebration where we celebrate our small wins. And sometimes it's a long battle, but we've got to win it little by little.
Yeah.
And I feel we're doing better than we think. And I think that's what we were saying. Glass half full. Glass is
Good
definitely.
stuff. Good stuff. Well, we'll park that section of the show. It might come up again in the fullness of conversation. But what I really want to do is kind of take you all the way back to the beginning of your career, because I've done a tiny bit of research, basically all I could find really, and your route to what you're doing now is really interesting. So yeah, take us back to the beginning of your career. What did you get off and running doing, and kind of take us forward from there?
So I studied law at university and was following the legal path, and I was working in a law firm and reading statutory instruments and pieces of legislation and going, who is writing this stuff that we then have to implement and interpret? And I felt like I really wanted to get closer to the lawmaking process in whatever way I could. And so,
Right.
in a long-winded way, I went into working in politics for members of the European Parliament, and I worked in the media and PR department for the Conservative Party. And from that experience, it took me over to Brussels to work inside the European Parliament, where I was an advisor, and then I was included in a lot of the discussions, but there were secret negotiations that took place behind closed doors. And I was like, how do I get into that room? How do
Yeah.
I understand how these decisions, these poor making decisions are being made? I'm going to have to get myself elected so that I can be the elected person that's in that room. So I was elected when I was 30. I was the youngest politician representing the UK
Oh
at the
wow.
time. And yeah, it was an extraordinary 10-year experience. I was elected twice, served 2 terms in the European Parliament, and met people from all around the world, all different political parties. And I specialised in international trade. But the first dossier that I worked on in the Parliament was on food labelling. And that brought me immediately to be talking about food and drink, and particularly alcohol. And I was known to be one of the few politicians that would talk to the alcohol industry and would actually discuss alcohol policy. And they were trying to put traffic lights on all food and drink. And, a big bottle of whiskey would have had a big green label on it. It had to sort of, point out the obvious. This is really probably not the message that you want to be sending. And
Yes.
so ever since then, I was known to be someone that would champion food and drink, and particularly, brave enough to touch on the alcohol sector. And we won an exemption for it. So that was great. But obviously that connection was there. And I became the vice president of the beer club inside the European Parliament, which is probably the most important piece of information which connects me to my job today, where we would meet and we would discuss the brewing industry and wider hospitality and how we needed to recognise the contribution it makes. And so and in between, I did work for the Rugby Football Union as well, so a little bit of sport flung in for good measure. But it's all revolves around my passions. I'm incredibly lucky in my career that whatever I love in life, I've been able to turn into a job. And I love rugby, I love beer and pubs, I love politics, and so I've been able to stitch them all together. And I think that now I'm in this job, it really brings together all those elements of things that I really care about really in
Yeah.
life.
Well, that's the dream, isn't it? You
It
do.
is a dream. I am really lucky. I am really lucky. And I think that because if you're genuinely passionate about what you fight for, you always get, 110%. And it makes it easy to get up every single day. You can speak, get approached about lots of different things. But the reality is you've got to feel it in your gut and in your heart to express it every day. And I do. And yeah, I mean, it's a tough day when I'm going around visiting my members and meeting such amazing people in beautiful pubs around the country and getting to taste some of the finest ales that we have.
I'm sold. Sold. Yeah, but there's a couple of things to unpack there. I think for sure. One, massive congrats on being elected the youngest member of the European Parliament from the UK at the time, because I think there's probably this perception that in order to be a politician, you've got to have had this long life experience and la 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 and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we could argue it's not really serving us well doing that. But anyway, you probably can't comment on that. That's me. That's for me to comment on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do need to reflect the people that you're representing, and I think sometimes you do forget about the demographic. I 100% understand that you need to have experience. My experience was off the machine in Brussels where I served. Without that knowledge of how the machine works, it is really difficult to influence it. But it was really clear you have to have the people that ask the right questions, and you don't need to be 50, 60 to ask the right questions. You can ask the right questions from an understanding and from a willingness to open up and speak to all stakeholders. I mean, I remember talking to some politicians that would, outright say, "Why are you speaking to industry?" And I would be saying, because we're specialising this piece of legislation on water leisure craft, and I don't know anything about water leisure craft. So surely the best thing to do is to talk to the people that do it, that it's going to impact every day, and fill in the gaps in your knowledge. So I think that with the experience I've had today, now I know the closer working with business, it would probably make me a better politician today. But at the time, we really needed to be more reflective of the demographic and have people that understood the process. And that was something that I think I brought and I learned throughout it. But as long as you've got the right person who's hungry to do it, represents their constituents, put in the hours to do that job, whilst they're in the parliament, but also outside of the parliament, I think that's really, really important. And someone that sticks to their principles. And that was something that I tried, and I'm very proud that I think that I was able to do.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed it. As a layman, who sometimes watches politics a little bit frustrated about that, it seems that a lot of the problems are very obvious to the vast majority of people, and yet they fall on deaf ears. And we've kind of alluded to maybe a couple of those issues within sector, even earlier on in the conversation. But I was talking to a guy last week from the US. Actually, they have exactly the same issues there. And for me, he fixed politics, and you've just kind of summarized it perfectly in that last statement that you made around, you fight for the things that you believe in. And actually, if people see that you are doing that, then it's very easy to get behind somebody who is fighting for the things that you believe in, who is actually genuinely then, putting this on the agenda and not letting it drop when somebody just casts it aside and all of that kind of stuff. So that to me is how we fix it. We just need more people who are, I mean, maybe they need better individual marketing to showcase what it is that they stand for, their values, their human values, not just, their political values.
Yeah, the job is not done on the day you're elected, and I think that's a trap that a lot of them fall into. It's your job starts when you get elected, and you
Mm.
cannot forget the pledges you made, the promises that you made, the principles and morals you said that you would stand up for and defend. And I think we need politicians that walk the talk and don't forget 5 minutes later the promises they made, and and with some sort of dismissive, well, they'll forget about it before the next election. That is absolutely not the case. You have to stand true to your mandate that you got elected for. You have to stay open and adaptive in listening. And I think that my experience as a politician and being lobbied has absolutely helped me be the person that
Be
then
the
lobbies
lobbyer. Yeah,
politicians.
yeah.
So I've learned from both sides throughout my career, but it really does help to know how they're thinking. Politics can be a game, but this is people's lives they're playing with. This is people's livelihoods that they're playing with. It is not a game. It is something they need to be incredibly mindful of and protective. And any changes that they make, the full impact needs to be assessed. The full impact of what their decision taken into consideration. Too often we're hearing now, oh, I didn't realise that, oh, I didn't realise that, but it's far too late to prevent the damage that's been done. So let's hope that this year they start to remember a little bit of the platform they stood on, growing the economy, it's standing up for people, creating jobs, investing in the UK and putting the UK on the global map. That's what we want them to do.
Mm. Yeah. Well, yeah, indeed. Well, I'm not going to get into whether they're. I mean, it depends. Also, I think one of these things that there's another frustration of politics for me is you have to be one thing or another. Like you have to follow blue or red, basically, just to be, very simplistic about it. But in actual fact, you can like stuff that happens on the other side of where your natural politics lie. And I think if the problem that I have at the moment is that if you're seen to be liking something that the other side is doing, it feels like you're just being, you're cast aside or you're shot down or whatever. And there's this polarization that's kind of taken place, which is just a little bit, well, I was going to
Yeah.
say annoying, but that's not a big enough word.
A good idea should be a good idea, and people should recognize it if it genuinely is something that's a good idea. But the same happens if it's a bad idea. Everyone should recognize that it's a bad idea
Yeah.
and not just say, oh, it's the polar opposite of the other political color, so I'm going to go for that. That's really not using their intelligence and being smart. So I think if we can co-create solutions, then let's do it. Let's find a way to co-create solutions that work with everybody recognizing that the right decision needs to be made. It's possible, but everybody has to be open to that. And I think sometimes you're right, tribalism does sneak in and it
Mm.
stops them from recognizing a good idea when it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. I never thought I'd be sat here on a Monday morning talking about politics. We just, yeah, gone straight to this today. But what I really love about your journey, and you can totally correct me if I've picked this up wrong, but it seems to me like there hasn't been like a grand, massive strategy that you were working towards this one thing. Things have happened within each role that you've had that have affected your choice as to what you or where you go next. And the one for me that I just love when you said is like, you were seeing that these policies and laws were being made, but you had zero capacity to affect that. And so you want to get closer to how you affect that. So that's not a decision that I suppose you make until you've gained experience of whatever it is your direction. It's not necessarily something that I guess you could pick up at age 15 and go, that's what I want to do. Some of these things just kind of come your way.
I think that you cannot plan life. Absolutely not. And if when I was 18-year-old and I left school, if I thought I would be elected as a politician by the time I was 30, I would have said, you're mad.
Yeah, yeah,
But, but I didn't know the pathway. It wasn't clear to me. I didn't come from a political family. I didn't have anybody that was plugged in that could lift me up or help me out. So you just go. But it's all about networking. In fact, my first connection in politics was by meeting someone in a pub. And I wasn't very good when I was younger about networking or realizing that you needed to ask for help. But I did. I actually reached out to someone I met in the pub who told me that they worked for members of European Parliament. I said, how do I do that? How do I get into that? And they said, well, actually, I'm leaving. Do you want to apply for my job? And if I hadn't met that person down the pub,
yeah.
then nothing would have happened.
That's mad.
So
Yeah.
I think that there is a thread to everything in my life that comes back to the pub, where a lot
That's
of
good.
life
It's
takes
a good thread.
place. But it's always about the people you meet, the networking, the connections that you have. When it came to this job that I have, 4 separate people approached me and said, "Do you know this job is the job for you? You do know that you're the person that needs to lead the British Beer and Pub Association." And by the time the 4th person came around, I went, "Okay, there's something in this. The world is trying to tell me that I should take up this opportunity." But it was because you gather a body of experience and passion and become well known, I guess, as an advocate in my sector, and then people will naturally gravitate towards you or you to them. But yeah, it is all about the pub at the end of the day, and that suits me just fine.
Yeah. That's a great line. You've already got probably a line of t-shirts from our discussions so far. Um, no, that's cool. I'd love to talk about a little bit about your time in the European Parliament,
Mm.
just because I think the vast majority of us, I'm just talking about myself here, don't really have a clue kind of what goes on and all of that. So well, I suppose the question is, what is the question? I don't know. What's it like to be in the European Parliament?
I loved it. It was great. It's an incredibly social environment where you meet these incredible people from around the world, different political parties. And I have friends from all across Europe, all different countries, all different political parties, and we could all sit down and have a drink together and be friends and see past it almost. The barriers that we have in the UK, everyone's very tribal, and of course that there's still groups that group together in Europe, but it was far easier to sort of recognize each other because we were just from different countries. But the reality of the situation is, whilst I enjoyed the social side of the job, the political side of it was deeply frustrating. From a UK perspective, we would win the argument. So months and months and months of negotiation would go into anything that was voted on in the European Parliament, and we would win the argument the whole way through, but we would lose the vote at the last minute. And so decisions were always being cemented that weren't always in our favour. And so it became deeply frustrating to try and work with the system, to try and change the system, to try and get the best outcome, perhaps for our country. And I know that it's a very controversial issue, talking about leaving the EU. But from my experience, it became deeply frustrating because you weren't able to affect the outcome. And ultimately, the outcome is what mattered. And so we tried and we tried and we tried. It didn't work out for us. But I'm not oblivious to the fact that the fallout from Brexit has been really difficult and people have been impacted by it. But I still think that we need to make decisions that's best for the people of this country. And hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that. But I still have great connections there. You know, one of my very good friends is the president of the European Parliament. One of them is now the highest ranking diplomat for European foreign affairs. And these people, we still keep in touch and we still have conversations. And this is important because whilst we're not members, we're still friends
Totally.
and we still work together and we
Yeah.
can still do that. So it was an enormously positive moment in my life, but it was definitely right for change for me.
Yeah, I suppose as well, like it's such a big machine. The difference there as well is, I suppose, is that if it's just the UK you're speaking about, you're just talking about basically trying to do the best for the British people. At least that's, I suppose, what it should be, and that's again another political statement in itself. But in the European Parliament, of course, you've got so many different countries' ideas and all of that. So it almost kind of showcases that actually by having that, almost you need a collaborative mindset towards trying to change something like that. I would imagine.
I think what I learned from my experience was listen to new ideas from a broader range of things, definitely. But their recognition, for example, of hospitality as an industry, it's unquestionable. For many of our European counterparts, to talk about hospitality, it's like their main industry
Yeah,
in many, many countries. And if it's not number one, it's number two. And yet in our country, and at the time I was there, we were the fourth largest industry, hospitality was, but we never talked about it. So I've learned a lot from with them talking about the industry within the context of the work I was doing at the time, about how important an industry it was and the recognition that others gave to it and how far we had to come in
mhm,
order to recognize it. And we still have that today. You know, we still really need to get behind our sector and recognize that it gives so much, the jobs it creates. We've got over 1 million jobs just in the beer and the pub sector. And the contribution to economy, 34 billion, is absolutely colossal. Yet we never talk about it. And, you know, we were talking about my jobs that I've had in my career. They weren't in the careers library when I was at school, but a lot of hospitality options are not talked about either. And so
yeah,
now, in the context of this job, I do talk a lot about the roles in hospitality, the pathways to careers that I didn't even know about until I started working in the industry, and really championing us as a sector that can get people into jobs really quickly, can get them progressing their careers enormously fast in very well paid roles, and you know, without having to go to university in many instances. So this is like a great thing that other countries have recognized for years. You know, very proud to say I'm a waiter and I've been a waiter all my life in Italy.
yep,
Whereas in the UK, you know, we still sometimes think, oh, that's a bit of a temporary situation, isn't it? Something's gone wrong, maybe. No, maybe it hasn't. Maybe they just absolutely love
yeah,
serving people. Absolutely love it.
Five-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
yeah. Somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago that service is a love language, and I loved that. I was like, yeah, I hadn't even thought about it until that. But I still believe that the ability to make people feel special is one of the greatest gifts that somebody can have. And we don't talk nearly enough around. I'm not talking about necessarily hospitality. I'm just talking about wider society. We don't talk about these being massively important skills that people can have and do learn from being in hospitality. And there's no better feeling, I think, than being able to kind of, turn a really negative situation around into a positive one just because of your ability to, converse with somebody and figure out the problem.
They're life skills. The skills that you learn in serving people in hospitality are life skills.
Yeah.
To be warm, friendly, listen, lean in, and work as a team. Work as a team, and also, to make people feel special. That is a really special talent. And lots of people have started their careers in hospitality and gone to other sectors, but the skills that they recognize, the skills that they learn, and particularly for young people, this is something we absolutely need to do, is to give them, particularly we've got a whole generation of young ones coming up now that were brought up during COVID that find social interaction quite awkward and stiff, and it's still enormously important in your professional life as well as your personal life to be able to break down those barriers and to connect with people as humans. That's what we do as a sector. That's so special. And I think if we can teach people that from a young age, we're setting up people for success in the future, professionally and personally. And that's something that we really need to value. We really need to recognize it, and we really need to value it.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. So give us a kind of I suppose a snapshot of what a day in the life of Emma McClarkin looks like.
Oh my goodness. Well, today I'm doing a podcast with this great guy called Phil.
I've heard
But
about
then
him.
later,
Not everything you've heard is true, by the way. So
no, later on, I'm joining the High Streets Task Force Senior Leaders Group, where we're going to discuss how we're going to lead High Street regeneration. Very, very topical because there's an awful lot of people, businesses struggling out there, and the pub is normally the anchor on the high street, creates that footfall other businesses benefit from. So we'll have a discussion about that. Later on today, I'm off to Chipping Campden, going to visit a pub, and then I've got a conference that I'm speaking at tomorrow. So, and I could be speaking with ministers as I was last Thursday, as well as speaking to new members, people that create new beers or start their own pub chains, for example. So bringing them into the membership, explaining about how we represent the sector. Or I could do a day out trade where I'm actually meeting my members. And that's so important to me because I get to hear it from those operators and tell their stories, because ultimately I'm a storyteller. I tell the story of the Great British Pub and our Great British Brewers. And it's a wonderful story to tell, but you always need new material, examples of how they've helped support their community or how a piece of legislation is actually affecting their small business, and the concrete examples of that. And those things are really, really helpful to help me then go back to Westminster, back to my job, back to lobbying, and try to get the politicians to support us with recognition for the sector, hopefully reducing the tax burden that we're under, and also recognising that the cumulative impact of all of the legislation that they're layering up really does hold us back from doing what we can do, and they should really be unlocking our potential to help support communities, grow local economies, provide local jobs, and really fire on our economy. That's something that we do, and we just need them to recognise that. So my days are really packed, really varied, all different parts of the country. And then I am also the chair of the World Brewing Alliance, so that might mean that I have to go to Geneva and do some lobbying at the UN or the WHO to make sure that international alcohol policy is supporting our businesses as well. So there's kind of lots of different layers,
oh yeah,
and it keeps me pretty busy.
yeah. And yet you have time to do podcasts on a Monday morning. I once had somebody on the show who was doing a podcast with me, and then immediately was going to Sky to do a section for Sky, and I was like, what? All of a sudden I felt like I'd made it because they're, I'm in the same breadth as an actual media outlet. But no, I mean, very varied, I would imagine, as well, because you have, there's a lot of different voices, I would imagine, even within your own membership, and trying to keep everybody on the same page and everybody happy must be a challenging job at times.
I have a lot of members, a lot of great members, but yeah, their priorities will be very often the same, but in a different order. And so it is difficult trying to get the right balance amongst them and getting their understanding of where the core priorities lay. But my members have been fantastic. During COVID, I think more than ever, we recognise that we're all part of the same ecosystem. We will all rise or fall together.
Yeah.
And so every part of that ecosystem needs to feel heard, represented, included, and we need to pull together. And that's why I've said, to other people that are still not inside the British Beer and Pub Association's membership, join us, join and support and strengthen our ecosystem, our voice in the Parliament, so that we can help affect the changes that make it work. And there will always be competition. That's what we do. But it should be welcomed. But I think that since COVID, this collaborative working process has come around where people are far more open about it. They recognize that everyone's facing the same challenges. And actually, we're all stronger, we'll rise and fall together. So strengthening and sharing best practice and experience now has become commonplace because they recognize that actually there's no point me just doing well and everybody else failing around me.
Yeah.
I need to bring everybody up at the same time. We will all benefit from that. But it can be tricky on tough days like budget day and fallout of things like that will have a different impact for different people. But we try and hold them all together under our umbrella and inside our family.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, the stronger together kind of is it's just business 101, really. I mean, this is why I think a lot of the time people kind of lambast big business, but big business is also essential to help give strength to the voice for the small person on the street who might just have one outlet or whatever. And bringing all that together into one place is a challenge which is not to be sniffed at, but equally when it works is a very, very special thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say, one pub in a village or town is a small business. It may be owned by a large parent company, but it is a small business in and of its right. One brewery that's in one part of the country supports the ecosystem there in that part of the country, and through distribution throughout the rest of the network and the supply chain. So there is a bigger impact always to be considered as well as the localized one. And we just need to try and find ways that we can, as the BBPA, shine a light on all the small contributions that are made. But yeah, the bigger companies also have, teams that can support others, that have full-time staff. On some of our initiatives like sustainability, small businesses can't afford to have a separate person that does sustainability, or sadly someone that does separately, just purely diversity and inclusivity. And sometimes the larger companies can give that guidance and support and sharing of best practice to the other companies as well, within the context of the group works that we do at the BBPA. And we're very proud of what we've done. And people are on different parts of the journey, but they're still on the same journey. They just be at different stages in it. And so how can we help bring people on the journey with us? That's ultimately what we do. And sometimes the large guys can actually help us do that. And I hope the BBPA is seen as someone that can help on that journey too.
Yeah, brilliant. You've got an OBE.
I'm very proud of my
We have to talk
OBE.
about that. How did that come about?
Well, but absolutely honoured to receive it actually from Queen Elizabeth when I was actually awarded it, and it's on my certificate for services to hospitality throughout COVID. And really, it's a recognition of all the work that my team put in and the British Beer and Pub Association over that period of time to sustain and support the beer and pub sector throughout the crisis. But I was actually awarded it by King Charles himself. So I must be quite an unusual person that was awarded it by one monarch and then given it by the incoming one. It was a very special day, and enormously proud to share that with my family, who it meant so much to them. So it was a great experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is my belief, is that I don't think anybody sets off on the trajectory to achieve that. I think when it comes, it's just probably wonderful vindication that, actually the work that you're doing is being seen. But also, as you say, like, you can't get there without the support of the people behind you, right? And that's family and work colleagues and whatever. So it is I always find these things a wonderful acknowledgement of your circle, whatever that circle is. Has you might have the letters, but everybody else has played their part.
I couldn't put it better myself. It is, absolutely, and it's a wonderful thing to receive and experience. And I was very lucky in that it was from the King, that I was able to make him laugh.
I was just going to say, I had made a note of this.
He's a big beer and pub lover, so we had a little exchange about that. But he genuinely is passionate about pubs, and he's done a lot of work with Pub is the Hub, and he really cares about us providing services to rural communities. And with the different parts of community life disappearing, post offices closing, shops closing, pubs and their diversification and and filling in the gaps, he's a big supporter of. So yeah, we had a good chat, and yeah, it was a wonderful thing to remember and a lovely memory that luckily someone caught on video. So I have
Very
that
good.
and show that to people sometimes.
Yeah, I suppose as well. Like, I mean, the message is obviously out there, like how important the pub industry is to everyone. Like, I mean, not just us who love the sector, but a comment I made on somebody else's podcast is that, you know, if you don't think that hospitality is important, or we were actually talking about it being the greatest industry on earth, imagine a world in which it doesn't exist. You know, imagine your local village pub not being there, or the place, your favorite haunt, your favorite restaurant, whatever, not being available to you anymore. And of course, a lot of us didn't have to imagine that because it actually happened in 2020. But that's how important it is. And for somebody like the King to acknowledge that means that the message is out there for sure. So we just have to, the message just, I suppose, needs to just get in front of the right people who can affect the changes that we need to affect. And that's, I suppose, that's on you.
Oh, no, it's great. You're right. You know, everything in life is about connection, human connection, and that's something that is really in short supply in our communities at the moment. You know, so we provide that critical connection for people. Sometimes the only conversation that someone will have in a day. So it really helps stave off loneliness. We know it's also the top of the list of things people want when they're moving house. They want a good pub in their community. And why? Because it says that they have really healthy, connected community, somewhere where they can go when they you know, can't face doing the washing up, or you know, they're just desperate to meet some new friends where they go. So we've got to keep providing that space and finding more advocates for it. So that's why I'm always reaching out, going, will you step up? Will you speak? Will you become a voice and a spokesperson for us? And then I was like, little old me. I'm like, no, you have to tell your story. You have to become one of us and join the army, so that we can keep protecting what's so very unique about the Great British Pub. And during the COVID, I have to say that I got contacted by lots of media in the UK, but a lot of international media, people really concerned about the future of the Great British Pub. And I'm like, but your bars are closed, your pubs are closed. He goes, yeah, but there's something really special and unique that when we come to the UK, be it from Japan, Brazil, Australia, we need to know the pub's still going to be there. There was
Right.
this deep international concern that our pubs were going to disappear and they wouldn't be able to have that unique experience because it is so unique. And so we have to recognise that first and foremost, and hopefully we will continue to do so, and the sector will continue to thrive.
I mean, that's wonderful to hear, right? That it's got that kind of international impact. But we always talk about it. My wife and I talk about the fact that whenever you just, maybe you're on a staycation somewhere in Yorkshire and you just stumble upon this little village pub gem, and you think to yourself, we've spoken about this so many times about the fact that there is nowhere else that does pubs like this. You know, like they're just homely, and to kind of have that international recognition for that as well, I think is, yeah, monumentally special.
It's really unique. It's really special. It needs to be protected. We cannot take it for granted. You know, everyone's like, oh, we love to go on a Sunday walk and go to the pub. Well, you know, you might need to pop in a couple of times just to make sure that that pub can survive throughout the rest of the week. It is something really unique that we have to nurture, and it actually will nurture you back. That's the thing. You know, the more you go, you'll get that authentic experience. It's so important to tourism as well. Top 5 things to do in the UK is go to the pub and have a British pint and some fish and chips. You know, that's on the list. That's the authentic experience. They want to get to know the people from that area, and that is the way to do it, down the pub.
Yeah, but also some of the best business deals or political deals or whatever have happened in the pub, right? Over the years, some of the best ideas come out of being in the pub. What's the most? I think I can't remember the statistic. I did read this somewhere, whereby there is a quite a large proportion of businesses start on the back of a beer mat.
Exactly. Bring back the beer mat so
Yeah,
we can write more ideas down in a
yeah,
nutshell. And I've done that in my lifetime. I mean, I love the pub so much, I tried to buy a pub. And I actually wanted to buy a brewery as well, a small one. But you know, but it takes an awful lot. You know, the dream of running your own pub is still there. You know, people still think, oh, it'd be great if I could own a pub and or brew my own beer. And it is a dream. It's still a very tangible one. It's still there for anyone that has it. That great love of it, the sector. But it is a tough job too. There is an awful lot it takes to run a business, and it's harder than it looks. Now I know from the other side, but you know, it is something that inspires people
mm,
for sure.
yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things I just want to cover before I let you get on with your Monday. And one of them was actually the question that I asked, what is the best question that you've ever been asked before? And this one really, really intrigued me, which was very simply, why do you like working in a man's world?
Yeah,
I mean, who asks that
I know.
question?
Actually, several people have asked me that.
Really?
Several journalists have asked me that question. And I never ever went into all of my different sectors thinking I'm, pushing the boundaries here as a woman. I just worked in areas that I loved, be it politics or rugby or now the beer in the pub sector. But people assume that I just love doing it and I'm just doing it purposefully. I just genuinely love these areas and I don't see any barriers to going into them. But it is an odd way to look at things. Certainly, if I've you know blaze the trail for someone else to do the same, then I'm really, really happy with it. But it wasn't a conscious thing. I just genuinely wanted to go into these areas that I'm passionate about. But there is still barriers and there are still boundaries and ceilings, particularly. And the more that we can support young women coming into whatever sector they choose and helping them to break those boundaries, it's going to make your business stronger and it's going to make it easier to get your hands on the best talent and it's going to make it your sector look like a forward-looking modern sector to be in. But several times I've been challenged on that, and I also spent a little bit of time with the army when I was a politician doing the Parliamentary Armed Forces scheme. And again, I was asked and challenged, "Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "There's no reason why I shouldn't be here. That
Yeah.
is absolutely none." And I never even thought about it for a second. But it is hard. The doors are definitely heavier to push open for women, and we need to find shoulders to lean in to help push them open. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, the saying is something along the lines of if you want to make meaningful, lasting change, then you have to keep everybody at the table to do that, right? I mean, if you alienate people in that process, then it's just going to be a constant uphill battle. So finding allies and finding advocates and finding the people who want us all to just be better is where it's at, and whatever your battle, I suppose, in that regard.
Definitely. I mean, like, you want the best, the brightest people helping you find the right solutions. And I think that when men and women work together, you get the best outcome. But you just want the best person first and foremost, and then you need to make sure you've got that breadth of thinking, covering all bases. Have we got every angle covered? That's how you're going to survive. And that's why more and more people are diversifying their businesses. They are making it open to all. As our British Beer and Pub Association charter is, we want to attract the best talent into our industry. Why? Because it will make our businesses better. It will help us bring in new customers and new demographics. It will demonstrate that we are a modern, forward-looking industry, and that is something that only happens when you put the best and brightest people around the table together.
Here, here. Amen to that for sure. Final question: the future. What's you've spoken about a couple of things that there are always the challenges of the day that you have to address on behalf of your members and all of that stuff. But what's in the future for the BBPA at this point in time?
Oh, for the BBPA, we're still growing in numbers, which is great. So we've got more people coming in already this year, more stories, more material for us to use when we're lobbying. So that's really important. Obviously, we've got the spring statement coming up, which is critical to see whether the Chancellor uses that opportunity. And then we've got the full budget again in October. Ultimately, we really need business rates reform, and one that's deep and meaningful for the pub sector, that rebalances the unfair taxation that they've been under, recognises them at the heart of their communities, and supports the business model going forwards. That's absolutely our number one priority this year, and making sure that we are creating the right environment for them to thrive. And that is a big job. It's a big task. And so we're looking forward to championing the sector and making sure that other priorities like sustainability and diversity don't fall off the dial at the same time, and that we can keep being at the heart of the community and the high street. It's so important to the fabric of this country that we have a thriving beer and pub sector. And hopefully we'll have some fun along the way as well. Let's not forget the fun side of things,
Yeah.
we are as a sector. There is hope out there. There are consumers that want to come into our venues, have a great time, and drink great beers. And that is something that's hopefully not going to change as long as the government support us in providing that space for people in their communities.
Hear, hear. That strikes me as a wonderful way to wrap up our chat. I massively appreciate your time today in the midst of everything that you've got to get your head into at the moment. Wish you guys all the very best and anything this humble little show can do to support. We are right with you.
Thanks for letting me tell my story.
No problem at all. Have a good day. And there we have it. What a cracking journey Emma has had, and clearly has a lot of work to do at the BPA supporting her members. Her story is also testament to the fact that you can find this industry at any time. We will of course be back next Wednesday with another amazing story from hospitality, so until then, have an awesome week, and I'll see you then.